They beat him, stabbed him, and left him bleeding in the street. He begged the law to act. It never did. So he became the law. On May 1, 2002, in a quiet Bosnian town, 4 men stood laughing outside a corner store, the same 4 who nearly killed him a year earlier. He walked toward them with a sawed-off shotgun hidden in his sleeve. 3 fell where they stood. The 4th ran for his life, later saying only one thing: "Only God saved me." This is the story of a man pushed so far into darkness that when justice failed him, he delivered his own. Long before his name turned into a warning whispered across Bosnia, before the newspapers labeled him a vigilante, before the courts stamped him as a murderer, Adam Halilovic was simply a man trying to build a quiet life. He owned a small restaurant, nothing fancy, nothing loud, just a modest place where the smell of coffee drifted into the street in the early hours, and workers with calloused hands found comfort in routine. The radio murmured soft folk tunes, the windows fogged in winter, and Adam calm, steady, soft-spoken, knew every regular by name. For a while, that world felt safe. But quiet lives attract loud problems. They arrived in groups of 4 brothers, inseparable, reckless. Men who carried arrogance like a weapon and alcohol like armor. They'd push open the restaurant door with muddy boots and voices already sharpened by liquor. They slammed tables, mocked customers, drove away anyone who tried to enjoy a peaceful meal. At first, Adam tried kindness. Then warnings. Then calls to the police. Nothing changed. Every evening followed the same pattern: the door creaked, the brothers walked in, and his customers, tired men who wanted only soup and silence, rose from their chairs and left. They weren't just ruining his business. They were poisoning his life. Fear doesn't strike like lightning. It seeps slow, patient, uninvited. And for the first time in his life, Adam began to feel it. He slept lightly. He looked over his shoulder. He memorized the sound of footsteps behind him. What he didn't know was that the worst night of his life was still waiting. Hook, and when it came without mercy. It happened the way violence often does, quickly, without ceremony, without warning, without reason. It was late, the streets dark and slick from an earlier rain. Adam walked home with a small bag of groceries in one hand, keys in the other, mind drifting toward dinner in bed. That's when he heard them. 4 silhouettes sliding out from behind parked cars, their boots tapping the asphalt like a countdown. "Evening, Adam," one said, his words warm with alcohol. Another stepped closer, breath thick, grin crooked. "Remember us?" He barely had time to inhale. The first punch split his lip. The second sent him stumbling into the road. Then came the kicks, unrestrained, vicious, the kind meant to break bone and spirit. A knife flashed. Pain bloomed hot across his side. A boot hammered into his ribs. The pavement felt like ice pressing against his cheek. He tasted metal, blood pooling under his tongue. He heard their laughter, distorted by fear and adrenaline. He saw their shadows moving around him, tall and merciless. He thought, so this is it. This is where I end. Then, distantly, a siren. A wailing cry slicing through the night. The brothers fled like startled animals, disappearing into the dark. Adam lay broken on the road, chest rising in shallow breaths, hands trembling against the cold asphalt. His vision blurred, light spun overhead, and his consciousness flickered. He didn't remember the ambulance. He didn't remember the hospital doors. He remembered only their faces, their smiles, their boots, their violence. He waited for justice to come. Justice never did. Hook, and the silence that followed was worse than the attack. They patched his body, but not his faith. He spent weeks recovering, stitches tugging at his skin, bandages wrapped around his ribs, each breath a reminder of 4 names the law refused to say aloud.
He filed statements, gave testimony, pointed out every injury, every bruise, every detail. His doctor confirmed he had nearly died. But paperwork moves slower than blood. The police shrugged. The court postponed. The brothers roamed free. Weeks turned to months. Months turned into a full year. People in town whispered the obvious: the system won't touch them. To the law, Adam became an afterthought, a file on a desk, a forgotten victim, a man whose pain was cheaper than the ink used to record it. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. He wrote a letter. Not just any letter, a desperate cry sent to the Supreme Court, written with the calmness of a man who had nothing left but truth. I request justice. Even symbolic justice. 10 marks each. If not, I will deliver justice myself. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning from a man begging to be heard. No one replied. Not a call. Not a visit. Not even a formal rejection. Just silence, a silence that hollowed him out and hardened what remained. It was in that void, with every ignored letter and forgotten report, that something inside him crystallized. If the system refused to act, he would. Hook, and once a man walks that path, there is no turning back. He didn't become a killer overnight. He became something else, a man preparing for the day he prayed would never arrive. In his small apartment, behind a wardrobe, lay an old shotgun wrapped in a military blanket. A legal weapon, once meant for hunting. But now, its purpose had changed. He shortened the stock, sawed down the barrel, filed the metal smooth so it could slide discreetly beneath a coat sleeve. The modifications weren't born from vengeance, they were born from necessity, from fear transformed into resolve. He didn't admire the weapon, didn't fantasize about using it. He simply prepared. Because deep down, he knew something the courts refused to admit: if the brothers found him again, the next time he would not survive. He paced his apartment at night, breathing slow, whispering a truth he didn't want to accept: if the law won't protect me, then I must. The words didn't feel heroic. They felt heavy, final. But they were all he had. Hook, and fate was quietly choosing its moment. May 1st, 2002. A morning that Lukavac would carve into memory with quiet dread. The sky hung low with pale clouds, the kind that muted colors and made the whole town feel unreal. Adam stepped onto his balcony with a cup of coffee. He lifted an old pair of binoculars, habit meeting paranoia. He scanned the street out of routine, not expectation. Then he froze. Outside the corner store, standing together as if mocking destiny, were all 4 brothers. Laughing. Chatting. Alive. Unafraid. Untouched. Every scar on Adam's body throbbed at the sight. A year of waiting for justice, summarized in the casual grin of the men who nearly killed him. He didn't shake. Didn't rage. Didn't make a sound. He simply understood. The moment he had warned them about had returned to him. Delivered to his doorstep. He closed the binoculars, set the cup down softly, and walked inside. He put on his coat. The shotgun slid into the sleeve like a final answer to a question no one else dared confront. He stood at the door of his apartment, hand on the handle, and whispered, "Now. You listen." Then he stepped outside. Hook, his walk toward them became something close to legend. The street was quiet, too quiet, as if the town itself were holding its breath. Adam walked with slow, steady steps, each one echoing like a heartbeat growing louder. He didn't hurry. He didn't hide. He moved with the solemn certainty of a man fulfilling a promise he never wanted to make. When he was 10 meters away, one of the brothers spotted him. Their laughter faded. Faces tightened. Recognition hit like a tremor under their feet. "Adem." "Don't," one of them muttered. It wasn't an apology. It was fear disguised as a plea. Adem opened his coat.
The shortened shotgun slid forward, steel catching the pale morning light. For one suspended heartbeat, the world froze. Then he pulled the trigger. The first blast tore through the silence, echoing between buildings, rattling windows, sending birds screaming into the sky. The brothers staggered, shock, panic, chaos exploding all at once.
He fired again. And again.
Each shot a punctuation mark on a story the system refused to write.
3 men collapsed.
The fourth ran, legs buckling, hands clutching at his wound, eyes wide with the realization that fate had spared him by inches.
He would later say, "Only God saved me." When the last echo faded, Adem lowered the shotgun. No rage. No triumph.
Just the heavy exhale of a man who had run out of choices long before this day arrived.
He placed the weapon on the ground. And waited. Hook, and soon. The sirens came.
They arrived like a storm, blue lights flashing, tires hissing against pavement, voices shouting commands drowned out by the tension in the air.
Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. Shops locked their doors.
A strange collective shiver passed through the street, the sense that something irreversible had just happened.
Adem didn't run. Didn't resist. Didn't look away.
He simply raised his hands.
One officer barked, "Why did you do this?"
Adem met his eyes, calm, steady, unbroken.
"I begged your courts," he said. "I warned you. You ignored me. When the law fails, someone pays the price." The street went silent.
Even the officers hesitated, as if confronting not a criminal, but a consequence born from their own inaction. They cuffed him carefully, not gently, not harshly, but with the weight of men who understood that the story didn't begin with the man they were arresting. It began with the system that failed him. The cell door closed behind him with a heavy metallic thud, a sound that would become the soundtrack of his next 2 decades.
Zenitsa was not gentle.
It didn't pretend to be anything other than what it was: concrete, steel, and the echoes of men who had run out of roads. But inside those walls, something unexpected happened. He was not greeted with mockery. He was not treated like easy prey. No one saw him as a coward hiding behind a gun. They saw him as something else entirely. Whispers moved faster than paperwork. "Did you hear about the guy who warned the courts first? The one who wrote the letter? The one they left to die in the street?" Inmates nodded as he passed in the corridors. Not with smiles, not with admiration written on their faces, but with a quiet, wordless respect. To some, he was a symbol of what they had always suspected, that the system was not just flawed, it was selective. He kept to himself. He read. He worked. He watched the seasons change through a narrow strip of sky. When journalists were finally allowed inside, they came hungry for spectacle. One of them sat across from him in a cold visiting room and asked the question everyone wanted on tape: "Do you regret what you did?" Adem leaned back in his chair, eyes calm. "I regret that I was pushed into a place where I believed I had no choice," he said. "I regret that the law ignored me when I begged for help." But regret for surviving? For defending my life when no one else would? No. I won't lie for your camera. The interviewer didn't quite know where to put that answer. But outside those walls, the line began to travel. Hook, and the story of the man who warned them, only grew louder.
Years in prison move differently. For some, time is a blur, a smear of identical days. For Adam, time sharpened. Every year layered another perspective on what had happened. He did not rewrite the past. He replayed it, again and again, asking himself the same brutal questions. Could I have walked away? Could I have stayed silent? Could I have trusted them longer? But every path he imagined always led back to the same place, a street. 4 men. A siren that came too late. A letter ignored. One day, a sociology student sat across from him, nervous, pen shaking above her notebook. "Mr. Halilovic," she asked, "do you see yourself as a hero? Or a criminal?" He studied her for a long moment. "I see myself as a consequence," he said quietly. "A consequence of what happens when the law decides some lives aren't worth protecting." The words hit her harder than any speech might have. She pressed, timidly, "If you could go back, would you do the same?" He sighed. "If the police had done their job, I'd still be serving coffee in my restaurant. If the courts had fined them 10 marks, we wouldn't be talking right now. So, no, I wouldn't do the same if they had done anything at all." "That's not an answer," she whispered. "Yes," he said. "It is. You're just not used to that kind of answer." Her thesis would later open with that exact quote. Inside the prison, his legend split down the middle. To some inmates, he was proof you could stand up for yourself. To others, he was proof that even when you did, you'd pay for it alone. Hook, outside, people who never met him were already picking sides. 18 years after those gates first closed behind him, Adam found himself being moved. "Transfer to Tuzla," a guard said, sliding paperwork through the bars. "Why?" Adam asked. The guard shrugged. "Quieter place. Less trouble. Maybe they think you've earned a little less noise." Tuzla was different. Smaller. Calmer. Less electricity in the air. In this new place, the guards were older, the routine slower, the nights quieter. Yet his name arrived there before he did. One guard looked at him through the bars one day and said, "You know, you're not like the others." Adam raised an eyebrow. "No?" The guard shook his head. "Most of them ended up here because they thought they were above the law. You ended up here because the law thought it was above you." It was the closest thing to understanding he'd heard from someone in uniform. Documentary crews came. Crime shows asked for interviews. A popular TV program did an episode on his case. They painted him as cold, deliberate, unapologetic. He watched part of it once. When the host repeated his line, "I regret that I was pushed into this, not that I survived," they laid dramatic music over it. He turned off the TV. He wasn't a scene. He wasn't a twist. He was a man who had made a decision with eyes wide open, and was now paying every second of the price. Hook, then one winter morning, the future arrived in an envelope. The letter was thin, official, with creased corners and a government seal. A guard slid it into his cell and said, "Careful. That one has teeth." Adam opened it slowly. Sentence completion date, May 1, 2026. Release pending final administrative review. He stared at the words until they blurred. May 1. Again. The date circled itself in his life like a predator. The day he saw them at the corner store. The day he walked toward them. The day his life split into before and after. And now, the day he was supposed to be free. He sat down on the edge of his narrow bed, the paper trembling just slightly in his hands. Freedom. The word felt foreign, like a language he used to speak, but no longer trusted on his tongue. Some inmates clapped him on the back. Others shook his hand. One old prisoner, eyes cloudy with age, said, "You know they'll never see you as just a free man, right? You'll always be a story first, a person second." Adam nodded. "I'd been a story for a long time," he replied. "Maybe it's time to see if anything is left of the person." That night, he lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar hum of prison electricity, and wondered, what waits for a man whose name has lived outside longer than he has? Hook, the answer came from a place he didn't expect, far beyond Bosnia.
2 weeks after the letter, a social worker called him into a cramped office that smelled faintly of paper and instant coffee. "Sit," she said gently, pushing a chair toward him. "I have something you should hear." She handed him another envelope, this one not official, not stamped, just hand-addressed in careful script. He opened it. "Mr. Halilovic, we have followed your case for years. We don't pretend to understand everything you've lived through, but we believe a man who worked honestly before can work honestly again. If you are willing to start a new life away from the noise, we can offer you a job in Munich. Bus driver position. Stable contract. Housing arranged. A quiet life, if you want it. Whatever the world calls you, we would call you. Employee. Sincerely, the Hadžovic family." He read it twice. 3 times. The social worker watched him carefully. "People see you," she said softly. "Some fear you. Some hate you. But some see themselves in you. People who think, if no one protected me, what would I have done?" He folded the letter delicately, as if it might vanish if he moved too fast. For the first time in years, he felt something that didn't taste like regret or anger. Hope. Older, bruised, but still alive. He looked up. "A job," he said. "A roof. A place where no one knows my past unless I tell them." The social worker nodded. "Yes. A chance. Nothing more. Nothing less." He slipped the letter into the pocket of his prison jacket. A strange thought crossed his mind, maybe the end of this story wasn't a grave, but a road. Hook, while he planned for the road ahead, the town he once left was preparing for his return. Word travels fast in small places. By the time his release date approached, Lukavac already knew. Adam is getting out. He's coming back. 2 decades later. He's walking free. Cafes became debating halls. Old men leaned over tiny tables, hands wrapped around espresso cups, arguing about the same man for the 1000th time. "He's a murderer," one would say. "You don't shoot people in the street and call it justice." Another would shake his head slowly. He begged the courts. He wrote letters. They laughed. If they had done their job, we wouldn't be talking about him now. Younger people, who only knew him from clips and memes, spoke in a different language. He went vigilante. He's a legend. He's proof the system can't ignore everyone forever. Online forums split into camps. Some painted him as a monster. Others quoted him like scripture. A popular comment under an old interview read, "They beat him, the law did nothing, he warned them." And then he became the verdict. In that same town, on those same streets, the surviving brother, the 4th man, lived a quieter life. He avoided cameras. Avoided interviews. But when cornered, he always said the same line, "Only God saved me that day. No one else." As May 1st drew closer again, the whole town felt like it was waiting for something. Not quite afraid. Not quite ready. Just waiting. Hook, and behind the walls, the man they were waiting for was packing the last pieces of his life into a single bag.
His possessions were few. A worn sweater. A couple of books with folded corners. A photo, the only one he had kept, of his old restaurant, taken on a day when the awning was new and the chairs were full. He placed them into a small bag, one by one. A guard watched from the door. "You excited?" the guard asked. Adam shrugged. "I don't know if that's the word," he said. "I'm ready. Whatever that means now." The guard nodded. "You know, I was here when your episode played on TV," he said. "Half the staff said you were dangerous. The other half said you were exactly what happens when nobody listens." Adam smirked slightly. "What do you say?" he asked. The guard thought for a moment. "I say," he replied, "that if they'd find those guys 10 marks 20 plus years ago, we'd never have met." Adam slung the bag over his shoulder. "That's the cheapest tragedy I've ever heard," he said. The guard actually laughed. For a brief moment, it felt like two men talking in a bus station, not at the edge of a sentence measured in decades. That night, Adam lay on his bunk, eyes open in the darkness, listening to the last prison midnight he might ever hear. He didn't romanticize freedom. He didn't expect applause. He knew some wanted him locked away forever. But he also knew this: he had walked into prison with his head up. He would walk out the same way. Whatever waited on the other side of the gate, fear, hate, respect, curiosity, he would face it. He had already faced worse. Look, and as the sun rose on May 1st, 2026, the gates finally began to open. The morning of May 1st, 2026 felt strangely familiar, quiet, pale, heavy with a kind of tension the world feels right before something irreversible happens. Adam stood in the release corridor while guards processed the last of his paperwork. The fluorescent lights buzzed above him, same as they had for 23 years. He wondered if he would miss that sound. "Sign here," a clerk muttered, sliding a form toward him. He signed. The pen felt lighter than he remembered. Another guard approached with a plastic box, his personal items, sealed and catalogued. He lifted the lid. Inside were the remnants of a life he barely recognized: a belt, worn at the edges. A watch with a cracked strap. The keys to a restaurant that no longer existed. A wallet with an ID photo so young it looked like another person. He touched the items carefully, as if touching them too hard might cause them to crumble into dust. "You ready?" the guard asked. Adam nodded. They walked him toward the outer gate, the air growing colder with every step. Two steel doors stood between him and the world. The guard placed a hand on one of them. "You sure you don't want someone to escort you? There might be people outside. Cameras. Reporters." Adam shook his head. "I walked in alone," he said softly. "I'll walk out the same way." The guard hesitated, then pulled the lever. The first door opened with a groan. A blast of sunlight spilled into the corridor. For a moment, Adam stood still, the brightness overwhelming after decades of controlled light. He squinted, eyes adjusting. Then the second door opened. And he stepped forward. He expected shouting. He expected microphones. He expected hands grabbing, pulling, demanding. There was none of that. Just silence. A wide, cold silence. A single reporter stood by the gate, camera crew behind him, microphone ready. "Mr. Halilovic," the reporter called out. "Do you have any comment for the public?" Adam paused. The wind blew against his coat. He looked the reporter squarely in the eye. "Yes," he said. The crew leaned in. Adam continued, "I warned them." Then he turned and walked away. Look, but freedom is never just walking out. freedom is what waits after.
The bus to Lukavac was half empty, filled with quiet people traveling between small towns. Adam sat in the very back, hands folded, eyes on the window. The world looked both familiar and alien.
New buildings. New cars. Children with phones instead of toys. Billboards advertising things he had never heard of. 23 years is long enough for a generation to rise and another to fall.
As the bus rolled past fields and small villages, he felt the old way creeping back, the knowledge that he was returning to a place that had never fully left him. When the bus finally reached the outskirts of Lukavac, his pulse quickened slightly. He hadn't felt nervous in years. Prison strips nerves away until all that remains is habit. But this was different. The bus stopped at a small station.
He stepped out.
The air smelled of coal and wet pavement, the same scent that had carried through his childhood. He adjusted the strap of his bag and walked toward the center of town.
People recognized him immediately.
A middle-aged man froze mid-step, eyes widening.
An older woman whispered to her daughter.
Two teenagers nudged each other, one of them quietly muttering, "That's him."
He was still a story here. Never a man. He passed the bakery. The hardware store. The cafe that once served as a gathering spot after shifts.
Places that had aged while he stayed the same.
Then he saw it. His old restaurant. The sign was gone. The windows boarded. The building tired, sagging, as if the years had pressed down on it too.
He approached the front door, running his fingers over the worn frame. He remembered everything, the tables, the laughter, the night he decided to sell it because 4 men had made it impossible to keep open.
A small ache moved through his chest. Not regret, just recognition of endings.
He stood there for a long moment, then stepped back onto the sidewalk and kept walking.
Look, but the past is not a place. The past is a person.
He found the surviving brother exactly where he expected, at the edge of town, in a small neighborhood where old houses sat shoulder to shoulder like tired men leaning on each other for balance. The surviving brother, now older, slower, carrying the ghosts of 3 graves behind him, was stepping out of a small convenience shop when he noticed Adam walking down the sidewalk.
His eyes widened. The plastic bag in his hand slipped slightly. For a moment, neither man moved.
2 decades of silence stretched between them, a distance filled with blood, fear, and the kind of memory that never loses its edge. Adam walked closer, slowly, steadily, without aggression.
The surviving brother swallowed hard, voice cracking before it even formed words. "Adam," he whispered. Adam stopped a few paces away.
The wind stirred between them. "I survived," the brother said, as if reciting a fact he'd repeated 1,000 times.
"Only God saved me that day." Adam's face was unreadable. "I know," he replied. The man took a shaky breath. You came back."
"I came to walk my town," Adam said.
"That's all."
The brother nodded, fear mixing with something else, something like guilt, too old to be useful.
"I'm not here for you," Adam added. "I came to see what's left." The brother hesitated. Then, barely audible, "I'm sorry." Adam looked at him. Not with hatred. Not with forgiveness.
But with the quiet understanding of a man who had carried the consequences alone.
"You lived," Adam said. "That's your burden. Mine was prison." They stood there in the cold for several long seconds. Then Adam turned and walked away.
The surviving brother watched him go, eyes wet, hands trembling around the plastic bag. He had expected many things from this moment: anger, confrontation, something violent to mirror the past. But what he received instead was the most terrifying thing: mercy.
Hook, and with that, Adam went to visit the only place that still held answers. The cemetery was quiet, tucked behind a row of evergreen trees that swayed gently in the late afternoon wind. Adam walked the gravel path slowly, reading names on headstones as he passed, names he had grown up with, names he had served coffee to, names he had once laughed with. He found the 3 graves on the far side, beneath a crooked birch tree. The brothers lay side by side, their stones matching, their dates carved with cold precision. He stood before them, hands resting loosely by his sides. There were no flowers. No signs of recent visitors. He wondered if anyone else still came here. He wondered if their families blamed him or blamed the world or blamed the men themselves. He wondered if it made any difference now. He crouched slightly, touching the cool edge of one headstone. "You did not leave me a choice," he murmured. "I begged for help. I begged your courts. I begged your police. I begged your country. I begged every person who was supposed to protect us." His voice softened. "They didn't come." A breeze swept across the cemetery, rustling the birch leaves. "I can't undo what happened," he said. "And I won't pretend I acted in anger. I acted in fear. Fear they refused to see." He stood again, back straight, eyes steady. "This is where it ends," he said. "Not for you. For me." Then he turned away, leaving the graves behind and letting the past stay buried. Hook, and finally, he walked toward the only future he had left to claim. Before leaving Bosnia, he stopped in a small diner near the bus terminal, a place that smelled of warm bread and diesel fumes. The waitress approached with a menu, paused, and looked at him twice. "You're him, aren't you?" she asked quietly. Adam nodded. She swallowed, set the menu down, and said in a softer voice, "I was a kid when it happened. My father always said, if the law had listened, none of this would have happened." Adam didn't answer. He didn't owe the world explanations. But he also wasn't running from it. He ate slowly, letting the simple warmth of soup settle inside him. He hadn't tasted food outside prison in years, and the flavor felt almost unreal. When he finished, the waitress slipped him the bill. Someone had written on the bottom, "Good luck. Wherever you're going." He folded the note carefully. Then he walked to the station. A bus to Munich waited, engine humming. He boarded, set his bag down, and took a seat by the window. As the bus pulled away from the terminal, he watched Bosnia slowly slide past fields, forests, small roads curling through distant hills. A country that had shaped him, broken him, and left him to repair himself. He closed his eyes. The world ahead was uncertain, but it was his. Hook, and so the story began not with a gunshot, but with a road. The road to Munich was long, stretching across borders and landscapes that felt like a different lifetime from the world he had left. When the bus finally arrived in the city, the morning light was bright, reflecting off glass buildings and clean pavement. A man in a blue jacket stood at the station, holding a small sign that read, "Adam Halilovic." He approached Adam with a polite nod. "Welcome," the man said in Bosnian. "We're glad you made it. Your housing is ready. Your route training begins Monday. You'll be driving line 62, a quiet one." Adam nodded, absorbing the information slowly. They walked through the streets together, past bakeries, parks, rows of bicycles neatly lined against railings. It felt peaceful. Strange. Almost unreal. When they reached his apartment, the man handed him the keys. "If you need anything," he said gently, "we're here. Just ask." Adam stepped inside. The room was small but clean, a bed, a table, a window overlooking a quiet street. He set his bag down and sat on the edge of the bed. For a long moment, he didn't move. He listened to the distant sound of a tram bell, to the muted hum of city life. No yelling. No sirens. No boots on pavement behind him. Just life. He leaned back slightly, closing his eyes. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't a legend. He was a man, still standing, still breathing, still trying. And for the first time in decades, he allowed himself to believe something he had forgotten how to feel. Maybe survival was not the end of his story. Maybe it was the beginning. They say a man becomes quiet near the end of his sentence. I don't know if that's true. But I know I've been quieter than ever. After 23 years behind these walls, your voice changes. Your thoughts change. Even the way you breathe becomes different. You learn to live minute by minute. Because years are too heavy to carry. When the reporters came in today, I could see the questions in their eyes before they even asked them. Do I regret it? Would I do it again? Do I feel sorry? And I told them the truth, the same truth I'm telling you now. If I had known what prison really is, I would never have done what I did. People think prison is just a place where you sleep in a small room and eat bad food. No. Prison is time. Endless time. Time that eats you whole. Time that takes 23 years and never gives them back. Time that changes you more than any punishment ever could. I told them. We can joke a little like this. But you don't understand what Hadžija really means. It takes everything. 23 years. 24. All gone. Do I regret it? Yes. And no. I regret losing my life to these walls. I regret not knowing another way. I regret believing justice would take care of itself. But I also know this, a man pushed to the edge will do things he never imagined he was capable of. And once you cross that edge, there is no coming back. Now, all I want is peace. Nothing else. No revenge, no anger, no enemies. Just peace. When I step out of this gate, I already have a job waiting for me in Munich. I'll drive a bus. I'll earn my bread. I'll live quietly. I'll rebuild what's left of my life. After all these years, I'm not walking out as the man who came in. I'm older. I'm tired. But I'm still standing. And maybe that's enough. Tomorrow, when the door opens, I won't look back. I've already spent half my life behind me. It's time to live whatever is left. In front of me. He begged for justice. He begged the state to protect him. He begged the law to do what was right. But no one listened. And when the system stayed silent, he didn't. Now the streets that once laughed at him have gone quiet. Now the same hands that beat him lie still. And now, long after the gunshots, long after the headlines, it is the mothers who cry. Because when justice fails, everyone pays.